Hello, everybody. Good evening. Who's ready to hear about some books? I know we're still getting settled, but let's get into it. Welcome to Omaha Public Library's Book Bash. Thank you all for joining us live and in person and virtually. We're delighted to have all of you with us. Before we get started, before I even introduce myself, I'd like to ask you guys a couple of questions. So if you're here in the room with me, just throw your hand up. If you're virtual, just drop your answer in the chat. So my first question is for you is, who here has been to a book bash before? Awesome, thank you. This table is very Amy Mather mentioned this. So our very first book bash was in February of 2020. It was at our downtown main library. It's our only other in-person book bash up to this point. So I'm curious, who was at that first book bash? Thank you. Okay, last one, big question. This is the 7th book bash between in-person and virtual. Is there anybody who's been to all 7? I will get you a prize later. I think it's a prize. I know. Thank you so much. I'm Erin Dewar. I'm the Readers and Writers Librarian for OPL, and I get to be your host for the evening. This is the closest I will ever get to be a late night talk show host. I even made myself little note cards, so I'm very excited to do this opportunity. So a rundown of how our night is going to go. So we do have both an in-person and virtual audience. We have 8 different OPL staff members who are going to talk about some books that they're really excited about tonight. They will each share 4 to 5 books. They're going to talk about fiction, nonfiction, funny, sad, creepy, and everything in between. We will split the evening into 2 halves. So we hear from the first 4 book talkers. We'll take a 10, 15-minute intermission so everyone can top up on drinks and snacks, and then we'll return with the final 4 book talkers. Then we will close out the night with some prizes. So if you are here in person, please make sure that you've filled out your raffle ticket. Drop it in the ticket tumbler that's next to the bookworm table, and then check out their table while you're over there. If you're online, there will be a link at the bottom of your screen to fill out our survey and get entered to prizes, and we will pull names from that after the intermission. So we will announce all of those winners here before we leave for the evening. The other really important thing to know for the evening is how to get your hands on some books. So if you're here in person, our friends from the bookworm are here. Wave to Carl and everybody over there. If you would like to purchase any of the titles that we're talking about, please stop by their table. You can walk out with them tonight. You can also, you might have seen Poppy, which is our brand new bookmobile out in the parking lot. So after we are done here tonight, Poppy will be open for business. We have all the titles that we are talking about this evening. So if you have an OPL library card, you'll be able to check out titles from our bookmobile. We also, on your tables, if you're here with us, there are little table tints with QR codes that will take you directly to our online book list if you want to place books on hold immediately as you're hearing about them. And if you're with us virtually, we will drop that link in the chat as well. So if you have any questions or issues throughout the evening, please connect with any of our OPL staff members. They will have little OPL name tags. You guys are floating around, staff, just maybe raise your hands. There's a couple. Or find them at the bar or the snack table, they'll be around. And if you're in our virtual chat, Autumn is in the chat with you if you have any questions. She'll be dropping helpful information, and if you have any questions, she will answer your questions there. Okay, are we ready? No. No. Still no. It's still not. Okay, we're going to switch mics. We'll just pass it. Yep, thank you. We're not ready. I think you guys are ready. Thank you so much, table to my left. So our first book talker for the evening is Jessica. Jessica is an adult services specialist at our Willa Cather branch. Her favorite library memory is spending time at the old Council Bluffs Library, reading true crime among the creepy stacks. An interest that spiraled into a degree in forensic investigation, where we're finding her way to the library. Obviously into the dark stuff, Jessica says she'll pick up a book about a sociopath every time. When she's not reading, she likes to collect vinyl and listen to live music as much as she can. Let's give it up for Jessica.
Oh, thank you and welcome all my fellow bibliophiles to this lovely event. It's so nice to see all your faces this time. I'm going to start out with some sociopath stuff, and I'm going to keep it rolling with more sociopath stuff, so you're going to like this, guys. The first one I have tonight is called The Kind Worth Saving by Peter Swanson. Peter Swanson brings us another deviously tasty crime noir featuring a savvy detective and a sociopathic criminal, first introduced in his well-received debut, The Kind Worth Saving. This story begins when Joan contacts private detective Kimball and hires him to tail her supposedly cheating spouse. Joan and Kimball already know each other, as they had both endured a tragic school shooting years past. He as the English teacher, her as one of his students. Kimball always felt that Joan was a bit odd and can't help but wonder why their paths are crossing again. Quickly into the infidelity investigation, people start turning up dead. Kimball, with the help of another friend from the past, finds himself tangled in a web of old secrets and on the bad end of a murder attempt. Is there a good end? Can he survive this case, or will his name end up on a long list of innocent victims, all who cross paths with Joan? You do not have to have read Swanson's debut, The Kind Worth Killing, to enjoy this book on its own, or The Kind Worth Saving, to enjoy this book on its own merit, but you should, because it's fantastic. But you do have to enjoy plots full of twists and turns, like a Hitchcock movie. That's how I would describe Peter Swanson's books. Noir, pretty black. Swanson has become one of my favorite crime thriller writers of late, and his new installment does not disappoint. This title is available in print, large print, SCD, downloadable audio, and ebook formats in our collection. So a little bit of everything. Next up, we have another sociopath. This one, I know you're surprised, but this is a doozy. This one's called A Certain Hunger by Chelsea G. Summers. Dorothy is a food critic with extreme tastes. She is also an inmate convicted of committing the murders of multiple men. She's narrating her story from a prison cell, hooking up vivid descriptions of travels between the United States and Italy, hunting for the perfect meal, the finest wine, and her next date. Dorothy reveals the nature of her crimes and conquests, reliving the sights, sounds, and tastes of meals past, lovers conquered, bloodshed, and, yes, flesh consumed. Told from the perspective of a hedonistic feminist psychopath through vivid descriptions of food and its preparation and consumption. As women are not generally associated with a typical food critic or murderous psychopathic role, some may speculate this book is a commentary on feminism and a woman's role in society. Enjoy this book with a nice Chianti, if you can stomach it. This book is available in print and ebook formats, and it would satisfy the book about food category for the reading chapter. Satisfy. Okay. Mrs. March by Virginia Fiedo. Another debut. I love debuts, by the way. I'm a debut girl. Love them. Mrs. March is married to a famous novelist who has recently published a racy new novel chronicling the life of an unattractive and repugnant prostitute unable to find clients. Much to Mrs. March's horror, and also the catalyst for her impending mental breakdown, a local bakery attendant compares her to her husband's latest protagonist, even suggesting that perhaps the character was written based on Mrs. March herself. This one statement sends the insecure Mrs. March on a complex downward spiral and triggers a desperate search for her personal identity and that of her husband. Paranoia and delusion abound as she begins to investigate the murder of a local young woman, questioning if the killer may be someone very close to home, someone she thought she knew well. Fiedo paints a poignant picture of a well-respected and classy wife and mother on a slow slide into madness, gripping enough to make you take a look in the mirror and question your own sanity. When her friends and family see her sinking into the mire of her own mind, they begin to retreat to higher ground, leaving Mrs. March with only her delusions for comfort. A debut thriller rumored to be made into a full-length film and released by Blumhouse that you don't want to miss. This title is available in print, downloadable audio, and ebook formats, and it would qualify for the mental health category for the reading challenge. All right, Night Crawling by Layla Motley. This book is a promising debut from a 17-year-old author, poet laureate, and lifelong resident of Oakland, California. The narrator of the story, Kiara, is also a 17-year-old girl trying to survive the city streets of Oakland. Alienated from parents and any support due to poverty, death, drugs, and prison, she is caring for her brother, an unemployed and aspiring rap artist, and Trevor, the neighbor boy she has known from birth that has been abandoned by his mother. Trying to keep a roof over their heads, but too young for many jobs and not enough experience for most, she unfortunately is forced to take to the streets for money. After a chance encounter, she becomes involved with the Oakland Police Department, which leads to a scandal, and she is forced to testify in a court case, despite threats to remain silent. Dirty, gritty, and hard as the city streets of Oakland, yet told in beautifully descriptive prose and heartbreaking poetic verse. This is a must-read for those wanting to understand lives lived by the marginalized in our country. Hard to read at times, but well worth it. This book will stay with you like a hot, sticky piece of gum to the sole of your shoe. I'm looking forward to more words of truth and empathy from this talented young writer. This book is available in print, large print, ebook, downloadable audio, and it's also in a book club kit for all you book club folks. It would qualify for the reading challenge in the categories of friendship or a book by a Black author. And finally, another debut, The Cicada Tree by Robert Gwaltney. Providence, Georgia in 1956. 12-year-old Annalise and her mama share a meager home with Miss Wessie and her granddaughter, Etta May. Annalise is a gifted pianist, and Etta May, although a Black child lacking opportunity to shine in the South at that time, is an aspiring and gifted opera singer. Also living in Providence, the Mayfields are a wealthy and irresistibly alluring family with deep roots in the community. They have suffered a recent tragic loss, and Marlissa, their only daughter, has started at the school with Annalise. The sudden and mysterious death of her father and the arrival of the beautiful new girl at the school, Annalise's life is thrown into a tailspin. Despite Marlissa's beauty and charm, Annalise soon learns that something is dark and broken in the Mayfield girl. Anger and secrets lurk in the trees of Providence. The siren song of the cicada gets stronger as the story saunters and then screams to a crescendo. Beauty and pain collide in the town talent show in this beautifully written debut about the secrets families keep. Written in both magic and song, this book will remind you that things are not always what they seem, and that you should be careful what you wish for in a town like Providence. This book is a true Southern Gothic gem from a talented new voice. It is currently only available in print format and would qualify for both the friendship and music categories in the reading challenge. And that's all for me. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dr. Bernard. Next up is Michelle, first off, Michelle. Hi, Barbie. Hi, Barbie. Michelle is OPL's book club librarian, currently based at our Swanson branch. You might recognize her as one of the co-hosts of OPL's podcast, The Book Drop, where she shares her favorite reads, including her go-to trope, a locked room mystery. Outside the library, Michelle spends time volunteering with 2 different youth organizations, playing with her kid, laughing with friends, and enjoying the wide world of TikTok, which she sends to me, and I check occasionally. She's been to 23 of the 50 states and needs to get to 27 states in the next 14 years to meet her 50 by 50 goal. Please welcome Michelle.
Y'all have to tell me. I might just be easier holding it.
Just hold it. Really here.
Okay, thank you. Oh, okay. You mean you can't hear me right now? Okay. Hi. Yeah. Okay. Right here. We're gonna talk right here. Hi, everyone. Are there any fans in the house of the podcast maintenance phase? Okay, good. So then you might be familiar then with one of the co-hosts of the pod, Aubrey Gordon. She has made a career of equipping folks with facts to debunk common anti-fat myths and equipping you with tools to take action for fat justice. In her second book, You Just Need to Lose Weight, and 19 Other Myths About Fat People, Gordon is doing just that, taking the predictable arguments about why people are fat, like fat acceptance glorifies obesity, or fat people are unhealthy, and push it back with facts, studies, figures, testimonies, and personal anecdotes. Gordon has a knack for sharp cultural and scientific analysis and can easily embolden anyone to stand up to pervasive anti-fat commenters. If you are looking to dismantle your fat bias or are seeking tools to fight for fat justice, then this is the time to pick up this book or start listening to Maintenance Phase. This book is available in print, audiobook CD, and downloadable audiobook. Aubrey does read it herself, and it's great. And this is for the reading challenge, a book about a real person. Let's take a moment for this incredible cover. Yeah. So another question for you friends, what is meaningful for you? This is a rhetorical question. If you find that question hard to answer, then Rachel Cargill's A Renaissance of Our Own, a memoir and manifesto on reimagining might be for you. Activist, academic, anti-racism educator, philanthropist, artist, writer, and entrepreneur, Rachel Cargill has been on a long journey of deconstruction, healing, and reimagining of the toxic society structure has used to oppress marginalized identities. In this book that is part memoir, part manifesto, part workbook, she takes us through that journey by breaking down the countless times she's had to reimagine the world, her work, and herself. She writes, reimagining the world is not just ideal, but critical for our continued healing. Here we are in a time when our goodness, our wellness, our livelihoods are begging us to dream up bigger and bolder realities for ourselves and one another. If you want to step back and step into yourself and feed your soul, Cargill's book will help as she explores relationships, education, feminism, work, and self-care. This is not a one-size-fits-all self-improvement book, but an open door into a possibility-rich world of acceptance, accountability, and allyship. Available in print and downloadable audiobook, it also is for the reading challenges, a book by a Black author, and about a real person. Okay. So after binging Dairy Girls, anyone else binge Dairy Girls? I had a hole in my heart, still do, and needed something, anything that about Ireland, and specifically something set during the Troubles. So that's when I found Trespasses by Louise Kennedy. Kushla Lavery is a Catholic woman, and she lives with her alcoholic mother in a small town near Belfast, a town heavily occupied by British soldiers. Kushla is a teacher during the day and a bartender at the family pub at night. During this time of unrest, there is daily news of car bombings, shootings, beatings, and events of the like. While working at the pub, she meets Michael Agnew, a man that is older, married, Protestant, and a barrister, which is British for lawyer. And he draws her into his sophisticated group of friends, and they begin an affair together. During this time, a father of one of her students becomes victim of an attack, and Kushla is compelled to help his family. In this time when political tensions in the town are escalating, Kushla is torn between all the things she wants to be and do. While many books set during conflict, the author deftly reveals how living amongst violence is intertwined and inseparable from daily life. So this is ultimately a story about love, familial, romantic, and that love between a teacher and student, and about the limitations of humanity. Available in print and downloadable audiobook, and it has been mentioned on the book drop. All right, in the spirit of learning from other people's stories, I'm thrilled to share Stephanie Foo's story with you. You might recognize her name as a radio producer at This American Life, but before that, she had been abandoned by her parents after years of physical and verbal abuse and neglect. She thought she overcame that trauma, but after years of panic attacks and uncontrollable sobbing, Boo was diagnosed with complex PTSD, a condition that occurs when trauma happens continuously over the course of years. This diagnosis illuminated the ways in which her past continued to threaten her health, relationships, and career. In this memoir, Boo candidly shares her experiences and situates them into a larger conversation about intergenerational trauma, immigration, and the mind-body connection. As a child of Malaysian immigrants, she learns how trauma can be inherited through generations. Ultimately, she discovers how she can heal with grace and joy and reclaim her story. It's compelling, beautiful, and shrewdly insightful. It's available in print, downloadable audiobook, and as a book club kit for you book lovers. And it's a book about or featuring mental health and a real person for the reading challenge. Okay. And finally, I could not do a book bash without talking about a book about motherhood or mom culture. So I was also literally influenced by a mom to read this book, as a patron that is a friend put this on hold at the library, and I was driven to read it too. So, in Momfluenced, inside the maddening, picture-perfect world of mommy influencer culture by Sarah Peterson, we are getting a well-researched and candid look into the wide, weird world of motherhood and how social media has impacted it. A mom influencer is essentially someone performing and capturing motherhood on social media and generating billions of dollars selling this image of perfect motherhood. But what exactly is perfect motherhood? Focusing mainly on American culture and its idealized version of motherhood, Peterson uses interviews and research to dig deeper into the effects of feminism, colonization, racism, capitalism, heteronormativity, and white supremacy on the perception and reality of motherhood, while also looking at why so many parents turn to social media for support, inspiration, validation, and information. With humor and empathy, Peterson explores the glorification of the ideal mama online. You'll never look at Instagram the same again. Available in print and downloadable audiobook.
Thank you, Michelle. As Dave is getting a seat, I'm just going to do sound check. Nicole, can you hear me? Okay, awesome. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to speak really close. So, our next book talker is David. David is an adult services specialist at our Benson branch with me. If you're a longtime fan of the Book Drop podcast, you might also recognize his voice and specific taste from his time as a podcast co-host. He says, if a book has a cover that looks like it could be painted on the side of a van, he's in. If he could haunt anywhere, it would be the jukebox at the former Brothers Lounge in Blackstone. Outside the library, David loves to watch gory horror movies, plays the synthesizer, and sings angry and snotty punk vocals in his various music projects. Please welcome to the hot seat, David.
So, start off with this one. This cover depicts an actual event in the book. So, if this isn't the kind of thing you'd be interested in reading, this one might not be for you. This is Mayfly by C.J. Lead. It is an ultra-violent and hilarious splatterpunk novel. Splatterpunk is back, which is a technical term. It's about a serial killer who works as the ice princess at the happiest place on earth because the writer didn't want to get sued. But yeah, she can be kind of seen as like a feminist response to Patrick Bateman from Bret Easton Ellis's American Psycho. So if you want something like that, that's just a little, that's less misogynist and more of the woman torturing, maiming people, there you go. She also, one way that she's different from Patrick Bateman is she has some genuine friendships. She's not like completely isolated from other people. She has people she cares about and people that she's willing to do awful things for, as well as a pet cat she's willing to do similar awful things for. Do the people want it? Not really. But she has that real humanity that grounds her and makes her oddly relatable. And she also has much better taste in music than Patrick Bateman did. Patrick Bateman, if you've read American Psycho, had no idea what he was talking about. But yeah, I'd recommend this one for anyone who is strong of stomach and just wants a really gory good time. For the reading challenge, you can read it TV show or movie, book about friendship, or a book about music. And we have it in OPL app in print. And this is Mayfly by C.J. Lee. Next up, I'm going to do Whole World in an Uproar by Aaron Leonard. I heard the author of this book on several different podcasts, and I was really interested in the book and figured I'd check it out. It's about the repression that was faced by folk and rock musicians from about 1955 to 1972, and it wasn't just repression from the state, but also from like private broadcasters and local community leaders. He used a bunch of recently declassified FBI files, so even if you're broadly familiar with this topic, there's some new info in there for you. And it introduced me to my new favorite folk singer, who is Dave Von Ronk. I downloaded his album off of the library's Freegal service, and downloaded it from the Freegal service, and now I listen to Luang Prabang on repeat to Annoy My Spouse. Great song, but it shows the repression from the outside, but also like the splits from within. So if you want to see kind of the splits between the old and the new left, parallel, everyone getting mad at Bob Dylan for going electric, you have an option for that. The musicians inside include Woody Guthrie, Nina Simone, The Doors, and The Kinks. So if you're interested in reading about the political reality they faced back in the 60s, this is a good book for that. And there's a discography at the end, so you can build a pretty awesome playlist if you want. And fun fact, Pete Seeger had 1,761 pages in the FBI's files. So if you want to talk about music that's dangerous, you can go back to the folk singer that your parents listened to. For the reading challenge, it's a book about a real person, a book about friendship, kind of, book about music, and it features TV and movies. We have it in OBL at print, and this is Whole World in an Uproar by Aaron Leonard. All right, next up, I'm going to talk about Augustina Basterica's 19 Claws and a Blackbird. If you remember the last book bash, I talked about the book Tinder is the Flesh, and I bemoaned how it was the only book that author had in English. Good news, we have the short story collection now. The stories are very short, some of them are only like a single page, but that also kept me reading, and I read the whole thing in a single evening, so just kind of kept saying, okay, I can read one more. And they really just dig their claws into you. There's scenes in it that are just like sticking with me like a waking nightmare. There's a variety in it. They're not all like as like over the top gory as Tinder is the Flesh. Some of them are more grounded. Some of them are more surreal. Some are pretty funny, but they all have that same way of driving their hooks into you that Tinder is the Flesh is. So if you've read that book, you know how much just keeps you focused on it. This has that same power. My favorite stories were Candy Pink, which was about a woman struggling to deal with a breakup in 5 easy steps, and the aptly named Hell, about a bird who's captured and tortured by witches, and The Solitary Ones, which is a terrifying story about losing power in a subway car. It's about losing power in both senses, both the feeling of helplessness and the electricity going out. For the reading challenge, it's a book about mental health, and it's a book about friendship, because all fiction books are about friendship. And we have it in OPL and print, or as a downloadable audiobook. And this is 19 Claws and a Blackbird by Augustina Basterica. Bad throw on my part. I'm going to just keep going with the recently translated weird fiction. So this is Hit Parade of Tears by Uzumi Suzuki. She was a Japanese actress and model who turned to writing science fiction in the 80s until she took her own life. This also, like the last one, has like a variety in tone. Well, the other one had just like the spookiness is the unifying factor. This one has just like an anarchic, anything goes, rule breaking things to it. The highlights for me included the opener, which was called My Guide, which was about falling in love with an alien, and it takes a kind of disturbing twist by the end. Trial Witch, which was about a woman who could magically transform her cheating husband, and she uses that to hilarious effect for revenge. And that's an example of a funnier one. And Full of Malice, which was about a teenage girl visiting her brother in a grotesque mental health treatment facility. That's an example of a more disturbing one. It is a good mix of madness and melancholy, so it will appeal to fans of Kurt Vonnegut and Philip K. Dick. It's also a celebration of the misfits and the outcasts, as it explores themes of alienation. And if you really want to impress that cool artist at the party at the punk house, you can talk about this book. If you get a phone number from this book talk, you're welcome. And for the reading challenge, it's a book about friendship, mental health, and music. We have it in OPL up front. And this is Hit Parade of Tears by Uzumi Suzuki.
Nice. That's a good one.
Last up, we have Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is a clever reimagining of the Gothic horror. It's set in 1950s Mexico. It has all the great hallmarks of Gothic fiction with the atmosphere, the decaying estate, the depraved aristocracy, aka rich perverts, running everything and clinging to the old world by preying on the new world and draining the life out of it. The protagonist is named Naomi, and she's a young socialite who travels to the mountain villa to rescue her cousin from her recent marriage to one of the said rich perverts, which is a family of eugenicist silver mine owners. Things are stranger than they appear beneath the surface, also as with any good Gothic fiction. And as the villains are using their forbidden knowledge to defy the natural order. So it starts off, like with the intrigue and the mystery, and then it goes into the waking nightmare that Naomi and her cousin must escape. It's a good horror for staying up late reading, as a lot of books I talked about today are. But it's also explores themes of colonialism and extraction, so it's a good one for the book club discussions. And we have it in OPL as a book club, so as a book club leg. So if you would like to use it for said discussions, we have that option right there. We have it also available in French and English and Spanish, in ebook, or as a downloadable audiobook. And this was Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia.
Thank you, David. David, even mine. And now for something completely different. Rose is an adult services specialist at our Willa Cather branch. An avid reader from an early age, she has fond memories of visiting the Carnegie Library in Fort Dodge, Iowa, where she grew up, the building of which she would love to haunt if she had the choice. She loves books about time travel and likes gardening in her free time. Rose comes from a family of 6 brothers and sisters, and if you can believe it, she's the quiet one. Please welcome Rose.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you for coming. My first book is Rose Royal, a love story by Nicolas Montieu, translated from the French by Sam Taylor. This author of this intriguing short novel was awarded the Prix Goncourt, France's most prestigious literary award, for an earlier novel. Rose is approaching 50, early middle age, but she's still a stunningly attractive woman, proud of her pretty shoulders and that her legs still stop traffic when she crosses a street. She lives in a small city in France, has a conventional job, and frequents a bar called The Royal. Rose has always had difficult relationships with men, and as a result, she bought a gun, which makes her feel safer and more confident. One night at the Royal, she meets a man named Luke, whose dog is dying, and they begin an affair. I cannot tell you too much more about Rose and Luke because I do not want to spoil any part of the story for you. At only 84 pages long, this book is a riveting, quick read, but it is not fluff. It is instead a penetrating analysis of a woman's sense of herself as it relates to the men she has found. Some things are universal to women across time and cultures. This is really beautifully done. This title is only available in regular print from the Omaha Public Library. My second book, The Red Collar, by another French author, Jean-Christophe Ruffin, translated from the French by Adriana Hunter. I picked up this book because the face of the dog on the cover beguiled me. Look at that good dog. And the question just above his head, what is loyalty? Street. In a small town in central France, a year after World War I has ended, a dog barks ceaselessly to the point of exhaustion outside an old barracks, which has been turned into a prison and holds one man, a former soldier named Morlack. A military officer arrives to question Morlack and to find an explanation for the act that has placed Morlack, a decorated war hero, behind bars, and for which he faces the death penalty. Morlack is hostile to the officer's attempts to discover if there are extenuating circumstances that will make it possible for him to spare his life. And the dog who loyally followed Morlack to war, what role did the dog play in the chain of events that led Morlack to himself? And what did Morlack do? What does loyalty have to do with all of this? And to whom do we owe our loyalty if it means betraying our beliefs? The author has distilled a lot into this short novel, and there is not a wasted word or phrase. By the way, this author also won the Pre-Gold Corps for his first novel, and he's one of the founders of Doctors Without Borders. This title is only available from our library in regular print. Moving on, my third book, American Dirt by Janine Cummins. Our story opens in Acapulco, where Lydia owns a store. She has a son, Luca, who is the center of her life. She's happily married to a journalist. But by page 8, this happy life is in ruins. Most of her family is dead, and Lydia and Luca are running for their lives with nothing more than the clothes on their backs, fleeing north to America to put their feet on the safety of American dirt. They're pursued by agents of the newest, cruelest, most ruthless cartel in Acapulco. On their desperate flight, they meet others, also desperate. Sometimes Lydia and Luca are helped, sometimes they are exploited, sometimes they find allies and are protected. Sometimes Lydia is a protector, as when she takes 2 teenage girls under her wing. Small acts of mercy and kindness help Lydia stay the course, as when they are aided by a man outside a small town, who, when she asks him, "Why are you doing this? Why are you helping us?" replies, "For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink." One sees pictures on the news, on the internet, on our Twitter feeds, in the newspapers, but this story really brought alive for me the desperation, the forces that send people through unimaginable dangers to reach the safety of the United States. This title is available in regular print, large print, audio CD, ebook, downloadable audiobook, and as a book club kit. Number 4, The Evening Chorus by Helen Humphreys. This lovely novel begins in a German POW camp in 1940, where James, a British officer, has started watching birds to alleviate the boredom and the fearfulness of his situation, where life is cheap. He closely observes a pair of redstarts who are nesting across the river from the camp, and his letters home to his young wife, Rose, are all about these birds. Meanwhile, back in England, Rose, living alone in a cottage on the Ashdown Forest with her dog, reads James's letters with increasing frustration and boredom. When she meets a young RAF officer who is stationed nearby, she comes to love him so much that she questions whether she ever really loved James at all. Then James's sister Enid comes to stay because she's been bombed out of her London flat, and both women have some questions to ask themselves and each other. All 3 of these people are faced with sorrow and uncertainty, and all 3 of them are soothed and strengthened by their connections to the natural world. Now, I don't want to give away too much here because I want you all to encounter things the way I did, all unexpected. Skip ahead to the second half. It's 10 years later, the war is over, and we revisit James, Rose, and Enid. All 3 are changed, of course, and there is a satisfaction to be found in the winding up of their stories. This was a beautiful read by an author who has always surprised and enchanted me. This is available from the Omaha Public Library only in regular print. And last but not least, The Romance Book Club.
Woo!
Gavin is floored when his wife of 3 years asks him for a divorce. He's a star player on Nashville's Major League Baseball team and a millionaire, and he truly loves his beautiful wife. But she told him she was unhappy and threw him out. Gavin checks into a hotel and proceeds to get drunk. He's rescued by 2 teammates who assure him that they can help him repair his marriage and win back his wife. And then they take him to a meeting of their special club, made up of 10 of Nashville's most prominent men, business owners, athletes, community leaders, the Romance Book Club. The first rule of book club, we don't talk about book club. These men save their own relationships from doom by studying historical romances and applying what they learned, and it worked. And now they're going to help Gavin. They start him off by making him read Courting the Countess, a steamy Regency romance. The Romance Book Club is told in alternating chapters from the viewpoints of both Gavin and his wife, Thea. The supporting cast from Gavin's teammates to Thea's sister are fresh and lively. The book does have some steamy scenes, but they are never allowed to overshadow the sweet, often hilarious charm of this unconventional romance. This is the first in a series from this very engaging author, and it's well worth your time. It is available from the library in regular print, large print, as an ebook, and as a downloadable audiobook. If you are doing the reading challenge this year, this is a book about friendship. And that's what I have. Thank you.
Wow, okay, we've made it halfway. You guys having a good time? Great. Before we roll into our intermission, I want to talk about a couple things you might have heard in our book talks. So you've heard people mention book club bags. So we have a collection of book club titles that you can literally buy a bag or check out a bag that has 10 to 12 copies of the single title. Check them out, take them to your book club, bring them back. It has a discussion guide in there. So if you have a book club that's not meeting at one of the libraries, outside the library, check that out just like you would a normal item. If you are not in a book club, I know there's some book club people here, but if you're not in a book club, either for the library or outside of the library, on your tables are a couple sheets of a book club menu. These are all of OPL's book clubs that we have right now. They read different genres. They meet all the different branches. So if you are looking for a book club, check out that menu, and maybe you will find one that fits your reading interest. You also might have heard us mention the Book Drop podcast. If you're not familiar, this is a weekly podcast about books, our community, and the joy of reading. A few of us are co-hosts of it. You can check in with us to help expand. No, what did I write? I don't know. If you're following along on OPL's reading challenge, we have regular episodes to dig into those challenges. We'll talk about pop culture. We generally just like to geek out about books. So if you're looking for a bookish podcast, please find us on your favorite podcast app. Okay, let's take a break. We're going to take 10 minutes and then we will come back and get into our second half. So feel free to run to the restroom, get a drink, get some snacks, and we'll see you back here in 10 minutes. Thank you. I hope you've got your drinks topped up and some snacks. Before we get into our second half, I'm going to do another little commercial. So just this week, we announced our 2023 Omaha Reads title. Hopefully you've seen it. It is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. We're really excited about this title this year. We will have a panel of interdisciplinary professors at the CEC on UNO's campus on Sunday, September 24th. We're excited for that conversation. We will also have 10 different book club discussions spread out through our OPL book clubs in the month of September. So if you are interested in having a group discussion on that book, you're welcome to join one of those book clubs. We're also really excited this year. We added a new component We're working with a local visual artist, Sarah Rowe, who has designed our promotional posters, and she's also designing a limited prints that we'll have available at our panel. If you haven't seen Sarah's work, it's really beautiful. She really loves this book and is really inspired by it. So please join us for one of our Omaha Reads events in September. Okay, are we ready for more books? Is your mic on, Steve?
There's my mic on.
Yes, okay. Stephen is our next book talker. Stephen is an adult services specialist at our brand new downtown branch. Stephen's favorite library memory is of a Boise, Idaho librarian called the Purple Lady, who lived in a purple house with purple flowers and decked herself out in purple hair, clothes, and makeup. In a former life, Stephen worked as a body piercer. You might be able to tell, which is why he says he can talk to just about anybody. He's drawn to books about LGBTQIA+ history from the 70s and 80s, a couple of which we'll get to taste of tonight. Please welcome Stephen.
All right, so my first book is called Last Call, a true story of love, lust, and murder in queer New York, written by Elon Green and published in 2021. So on the surface, this is a story about a serial killer and his crimes. For me, though, the heart of this book, and the reason I think it sticks out so much in the true crime genre, is its focus on the lives of the victims who were gay men living during the 70s and 80s in and around New York City. It's also the story of how the police and society at large ignored an obvious serial killer because of rampant homophobia. Green does a solid job of highlighting things like the gay panic defense and the increase in violence towards gay men at the beginning of the AIDS crisis. He also shows how these types of views hindered investigations into the Last Call murders. But really, it's the lives of the victims that kept me so interested in the story being told. Green gives each victim a background, shows who they were, who they loved, their friends and family, and ultimately, for some, why they were chosen as victims. So much of the book is dedicated to the victims and the shortcomings of the investigators, but the author doesn't even name the killer until halfway through the book. Victim-focused books in the true crime genre feel so rare, especially if they're about those who society tends to value less. It almost feels revolutionary to have a book that points out these men were not just victims, and that after their deaths, they were mourned by friends and family. I'd also say that this is a good book for people who like true crime, but have gotten burnt out on the usual formula of the genre. And we have it as a book and downloadable audiobook, and it covers the LGBTQ+ history and what was it? Mentioned on the podcast.
Real person.
Oh yeah, real person. I can't remember all this stuff. That's why it's written. All right. Yes, Mom. My next book is We Believe the Children, A Moral Panic in the 1980s. It was written by Richard Beck and published in 2015. In this fairly dense book, Richard Beck takes a deep dive into the moral panic surrounding satanic ritual abuse during the 1980s, and how new techniques in psychiatry and law enforcement created a moral panic centered on child care facilities. Over the decade, hundreds of children were forced to fabricate lurid stories about satanic rituals, physical and sexual abuse, and human and animal sacrifices that literally could not have happened. Like, for instance, one child claimed they were flushed down the toilet in New Mexico where they were forced to sacrifice babies. I can tell you that that did not happen. These claims were often taken at face value by those in power, since there was a belief that no child could come up with such a strange and violent story. Because of this, many innocent people were sent to prison with extremely long sentences. Beck lays out a bewildering narrative that shows how easily people succumb to moral panics and how destructive they are for everyone involved. Well, everyone except those in power, like the police and prosecutors who, spoiler alert, didn't receive any negative consequences for the railroading trials and destroying lives. That isn't really a spoiler though, because that's given from the start of the story. This was a super frustratingly interesting story, but heads up, it obviously deals a lot with all forms of child abuse. Even though the vast majority of the crimes described did not happen, there are still graphic descriptions, and they're often pretty unsettling. So if that is something that you feel like you can handle, then this is a really interesting cautionary tale about memory, psychology, and our moral responsibility to investigate claims thoroughly, respectfully, and rationally. This covers the LGBT. No, you never remember the challenges. I'm sorry. Anyways, we have that as a physical book. All right, so those were kind of sad. The next one's a lot happier. So this one's called, and the category is Inside New York's Vogue, House, and Ballroom Culture, written by Ricky Tucker and published in 2021. The publisher description for and the category is that of a love letter of ballroom culture, and that is an extremely apt description. It's a book that also decries the ways in which a culture that is predominantly made up of people of color have been mined by those in power for its entertainment value while leaving behind its progenitors and stars. You may have heard about ballroom culture when it was first popularized for the masses by the cult documentary Paris is Burning, or when it was appropriated by Madonna for her classic song Vogue, or even more recently when it was dramatized to critical acclaim in the TV show Pose. Using a mix of autobiographical tales, historical reviews, interviews, and a ton of super pertinent, thought-provoking social commentary, Tucker brings the reader into the New York ballroom scene and welcomes you to see it in all its glory. You'll learn about the basic categories of voguing, the possibly rigged, but definitely unfair pageant moment that led to the creation of the house system, and a bunch of other things that make up ballroom culture. The author's obvious love for the culture is contagious and will keep you wanting to learn more about its history and current form. The interviews with legendary stars of the scene help to develop those ideas while also ensuring that the people involved in the story are part of its telling. I'd suggest this to anyone who likes RuPaul's Drag Race, Legendary, or We're Here, since this book will deepen your understanding of the unique culture and history of ballroom and how it shaped the art of drag and pageantry today. This one I know covers LGBTQ+ history and friendship. We have it as an ebook and a book. This one. This is my first time, so I'm really nervous, you know?
You're doing a great job.
Okay. My fourth book is The Stranger in the Woods, The Extraordinary Story of the Last True Hermit, written by Michael Finkel and published in 2017. All right. This follows the story of Christopher Knight and his time spent living as a hermit in rural Maine. It is also the story of the nearby town of Rome, Maine, that Knight kind of really terrorized it. The book raises some interesting questions about what constitutes a hermit and whether Christopher should even be classified as one, since he relied on so much stuff that he needed to survive. You'd be surprised that there's actually raging debates online of what an actual hermit is. Maybe not that surprising, really. The author also places himself into the narrative and uses it as a kind of comeback story for his own fall from grace after manufacturing a story in the New York Times. Obviously, don't do that. What kept me interested in the story was that there was never any real attempt by the author to make Knight some clean, saintly figure. The story always acknowledges the way that Knight negatively affected the surrounding community, even when you got the sense of awe that the author had for just for Knight's ability to live through the ordeals he faced. It's an interesting story where nobody is really that good or likable, including the author, but there is a strange level of respect that gets created. Not to mention the fact that Knight was able to live how he did during the winter in Maine makes a gripping story. His methods, albeit not legal in the slightest, are still a testament to humankind's ability to live through some really extreme stuff. We actually read this for the Chat and Shoot Book Club, which meets downtown on the second Wednesday of the month at noon, which I also happen to run, just to say. And it was really fun to debate all the moral issues the book brought up. We have it in large print, audiobook, we have it as a book club bag, ebook, and the physical book format. All right, now the fun. So, this is called Deep Sniff, A History of Paupers and Queer Futures. It was written by Adam Smith and published in 2021. So, to end on a high note, Deep Sniff comes from... There's a lot of innuendos in this one, so you can find them all. Deep Sniff covers the history of paupers and their prevalence in gay culture, while also trying to argue for a new queer future. The history of paupers was surprisingly interesting, especially when the author discusses the ways in which they have been marketed and used by gay men since the mid-20th century. That said, this book does not hide behind innuendo, and going into it, you should probably be aware that paupers are considered an enhancer for sexual activities, and at times the author really revels in the details of that fact. But they also do a great job of showing how paupers are a part of modern culture, or pop culture, and have begun seeping into more mainstream and less outright gay venues. It also kind of felt like the author was using poppers when writing the book. Pages would go by with pretty cogent narratives about the history, and then bam, out of nowhere, you were left feeling a little dizzy and confused by an interesting, if slightly out there, argument regarding masculinity in the world of Star Trek. I think he says that Odo is the perfect example of a gender-neutral character. I don't know. Anyways, it's a pretty short read though, so these moments of confusion don't last long, and you're back into some strange subculture in the gay scene relying on poppers for its existence, or some obscure scientist from the 1800s who used amyl nitrates for angina. Amyl nitrates are also poppers. I just realized that I didn't make that clear. The value of this book though is that it exists, and that someone went to the trouble to write down the history of a substance that is sort of everywhere in some ways, but also pretty hidden. Smith openly and proudly describes just how ubiquitous poppers are in a way that honestly makes me uncomfortable because it's so right for someone to misunderstand. That also kind of feels like the point. If you're part of the scene that this book describes, this will give you some fresh new insights into where poppers come from, and even some new ways to view your own masculinity or gender. And if you're not, well, you're going to get a view into a world you didn't know existed. Big view. And I would ask that you take a deep breath, hold it for a few seconds, exhale, and go in with an open mind.
Thank you, Stephen. As our next group member is getting seated, just a reminder to make sure that you have dropped your raffle ticket in the ticket tumbler over by the bookworm. We will pull those in a couple book talkers. Also, my apologies to the virtual audience, because every time I forget to drop that survey link for your prizes, and we did it at the half, so have not dropped your name in that survey too, and we'll pull your prizes at the end as well. Okay, next up is Rosemary. Rosemary is an adult services specialist at our Abrahams branch. She enjoys stories with strong female leads, stories told through a female perspective, and retellings of classics. One of her favorite library memories is being able to walk to the Old South Omaha Library from her parents' store on 24th Street. When she's not reading, she enjoys yarn art, especially crochet, writing, playing mahjong, and cooking, both making and eating. And like most of us, she'd love to haunt a bookstore or library so she can work on her to-be-read pile even after death. Please welcome Rosemary.
Hello, everyone hear me? Okay. Awesome.
Yell into it.
Yeah. So my first pick is called Ghost Music by Ann Yu, and it's about Song Yan, who's a Beijing piano teacher trying to bond with her mother-in-law while her husband keeps taking company trips. Boxes of mushrooms mysteriously arrive in the mail, leading her to find a long-lost pianist who mysteriously disappeared a decade ago. Along the way, she discovers her husband's best-kept secrets, one of them being a secret family. Gets better. She has dreams of talking mushrooms. And searches for her true self. If you are a fan of Haruki Murakami like I am, you will find this quite at home with an intricate plot and melancholy and lyrical details that make sense for a musical theme. It is also character driven, so she is trying to find her identity and also trying to find out what defines your identity in a way. We have this in book format, although I have heard that we might have the audiobook, and I want to hear what those mushrooms sound like. The challenges are food, plants, music, and friendship, because she does have a hairdresser friend that she gossips all the time too. So, oh yeah. My second pick, it is a real book stopper. It is, I feel so bad that they have a few copies over there because it is like 800 pages. but it is really good. It is really good. The Priority of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. So in the north, Queen Sabran IX believes her bloodline keeps a dragon known as the Nameless One at bay. Those in the south believe otherwise. They are part of a female mage society known as the Priory of the Orange Tree. And so in the east, Being a dragon rider is considered an honor and a dream for Tane, whose actions help set in motion an elaborate chain of events bringing all three nations together. This is an epic fantasy, so if you're a Game of Thrones fan or a House of Dragons fan, it had dragons before the first season. It is full of intricate plots with a dramatic atmosphere and lots of strong female characters, and it is considered a twist on the legend of St. George and the Dragon. Our formats are book and ebook if you don't want the heavy book itself. Challenges are friendship, since all three nations have to come together, and it does include LGBTQIA+ themes. Speaking of female empowerment, let's talk about The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. In a dystopian future, the U.S. has become Gilead, a Christian theocracy that separates women into classes. The wives, Marthas, who are housekeepers, and handmaids whose sole purpose in life is to reproduce offspring. The novel is told through the lens of Fred, who still recalls the past as a way to cope with the present-day nightmare. It is considered a science fiction classic, and it's character-driven as you see it through the eyes of Fred, with compelling descriptions of a disturbing alternate reality, and I'm hoping it stays an alternate reality and not a real thing. We have this in so many formats, there is no excuse, you cannot read this. We have it in English and Spanish, we have it in large print, we have it in audiobook, we have it in ebook, we have it in book club bag, and we have it in a graphic novel. Yeah. Yeah, and so we also have for seasons 1 through 5 on DVD. So, yes. The challenges that this fulfills is movie, TV show, if you want to count the show, but also Serena Joy, who is a character in The Handmaid's Tale, used to be a televangelist. So there was TV. So it counts. And friendship, as in these women are trying to bond together and trying to, how do we survive this political atmosphere that is pretty much defining us by our hearts and rather not who we are. Yeah! Woo! All right, so my last pick, speaking of political fiction, is Animal Castle by Xavier Dorison. Under the heavy hoof rule, because he's a bull, of President Silvio, Miss B takes on her late husband's job of delivering bricks to provide for her kittens. When a performing rat visits the castle and uses his show to question the bull's authority, Miss B is inspired to start a resistance movement. And with the help of a gigolo rabbit, because you know they're really good at stuff, she paints daisies around the ground. What happens next sets in motion the future of the Animal Republic. So this is considered a modern twist on Animal Farm with a medieval flair because it happens at a castle. Fancy. It's fast-paced with lots of anthropomorphic characters, and we have it in graphic novel, and this fulfills friendship as a challenge. I hope you guys enjoy all my picks and as well as the other readers as well.
Thank you, Rosemary. Up next is Nicole. Nicole is yet another adult services specialist from our new downtown branch. Her favorite library memory is of being featured on the front page of the Council Bluffs Nonpareil newspaper while voting in a kid's presidential election. She was disappointed because her only options were an elephant or a donkey, and she really wanted to vote for a camel. A big romance reader, she's into friends to lovers and taboo romance. When she's not reading, she loves cross-stitching, spending time with her dog, playing video games, and stretching her skills as an amateur tarot reader. Please welcome Nicole.
Can y'all hear me in the back okay? Cool, okay. So, in the words of iconic duo Salt and Pepper, let's talk about sex, baby. Specifically, bisexuality. Bi, The Hidden Culture, History, and Science of Bisexuality by Julia Shaw gives readers an extremely vast look into bisexual history and culture. It's definitely science and research heavy, which usually isn't my jam. I'm more interested in the emotional side of things, but it's exciting to see books that discuss bisexuality, so I gave it a go. Shaw tackles topics like bi erasure, consensual non-monogamy, identity, coming out, and more. The biggest takeaway from this book, for me at least, is that bisexuality is extremely overlooked. People make assumptions that bi people are confused, that we're just having fun before we settle down, that we need to decide between being straight or being gay, because there's absolutely no way that someone could be sexually or romantically interested in people of all genders. I don't think I can lay the sarcasm on thick enough. Clocking in at only 226 pages, this short book covers a lot, which makes it a really good primer for people wanting to learn more about bisexuality. It made me really hungry for more emotional memoirs and more novels about bisexual people, and having this information knocking around in my head helps me better understand myself and other bi people. Bi is available in book and downloadable audiobook formats and fulfills the reading challenge prompt, read a book about LGBTQIA+ history. Now I'm going to take you on a little journey. Let's go back to New York City in the 1920s during the Harlem Renaissance, when Passing by Nella Larson was first published. For those of you who don't know what passing is an act that allows an individual to cross from one culture or community to another completely undetected. For example, a bisexual person might pass as straight if it ensures their safety. Now, on to the book. Passing is about identity and race and how it affects the lives of two women. During a trip to Chicago, Irene Redfield runs into Claire Kendry, a childhood friend she hasn't spoken to in over 10 years. They have an impromptu catch-up, which is the catalyst of our story. Irene is steady and guarded, while Claire is daring and flirtatious. Irene is married to Brian, a Black doctor, and proud to be part of the Black community. Claire is passing as a white man and married to John Ballou, an outspoken racist who does not know his wife is Black. A few years go by, and suddenly Claire is living in New York City, showing up unannounced at Irene's home, inviting herself to Irene's social engagements, and possibly having an affair with Brian? ? She's really making herself at home in a home where she's not welcome. And then one night, John crashes their party and straight up asks Claire if she's Black. Seemingly, nothing much happens plot-wise. I was reading it thinking, it's moving kind of slow and nothing is really happening, but the language is beautiful and people love it, so I'm gonna finish it. Clearly, my privilege as a white woman was shown, because there's a constant underlying sense of danger and foreboding throughout the story, heightening with each turn of a page. Claire is taking a risk every single day, passing as white, especially with a husband like her. The story simmers and simmers and simmers till it reaches its boiling point, and then it's just over. I was expecting more, and there was nothing. It's a subtle yet memorable book you could read 10 times and find something new with each read. I ended up purchasing my own copy because I wanted to highlight, underline all that stuff. This is your reminder to not write in library books, please. I would appreciate that. Passing is available as a book, ebook, and downloadable audiobook, and it fills the reading challenge prompt, read a book by a Black author. Netflix also had an adaptation come out in like 2021. It's absolutely stunning, so I highly recommend that. Our next stop is the Los Angeles Public Library. You're here at a library event, so you obviously like books and reading, and hopefully libraries, which means you've probably already heard about the library book by Susan Orlean. If you haven't, let me be the one to tell you to read it. It's probably in my top 5 favorite books of all time. This book is nearly impossible to categorize. It's true crime, memoir, and a history lesson about libraries. Orlean researches the catastrophic fire that ignited at the Los Angeles Public Library on April 29, 1986, and the man who started it. She shares her childhood memories of going to the library with her mom and re-experiences that same magic with her own kid and as an adult. She interviews current librarians and details what they do to keep the library functioning. She reminds us of other library fires and the importance of access to information and resources. I adore this book. The way Orlean describes libraries is beautiful. She says, quote, "The publicness of the public library is an increasingly rare commodity. It becomes harder all the time to think of places that welcome everyone and don't charge any money for that warm embrace." End quote. And my favorite, quote, "In times of trouble, libraries are sanctuaries." End quote. I hope we can be that sanctuary for you. If you're interested in diving more into this topic, the Omaha Public Library Foundation's 10th annual Between the Lines fundraiser is coming up on September 26th at the Holland Center. Yes, thank you. This year it features a conversation between Susan Orlean and Molly Shannon. Tickets are on sale now, and you can attend in person or virtually. The library book is available in all formats, including a book club bag, giving you the perfect excuse to host your own book club and share this book and libraries with friends and family. Okay, it's time to catch our flight to Austria and talk about The Wall by Marlon Haushofer, translated by Sean Whiteside, originally published in 1963. It's eerily relevant for us 60 years later. Our unnamed narrator goes on a 3-day trip with her friends at their hunting lodge in the Austrian mountains. Very casual, I know. Her friends go to town for the night and she goes to bed early. In the morning, she realizes her friends haven't come home and she can't leave because an invisible wall has sprung up overnight. Completely separated from society, she's engulfed in loneliness and fear of her new reality. Her only companions are a cat, a dog, a cow, and herself. This story is her report of everything she did to survive. The Wall is an extremely special book. The narrator is no nonsense. This is what I did. This is the whole, this is what happened. My report ends here because I ran out of paper. Literally, that's the last page. There's 0 dialogue in the whole book, so if that's not your jam, I would maybe suggest another one, but honestly, this one is so good. So just give it a try. It moves quickly. So as readers, we have room to interpret the story how we want. Granted, this is true for most books, but it's especially true for this one. For me, I thought about living through a pandemic and the isolation and fear that accompanies it. In the afterword, Claire Louise Bennett explains how the feminist aspect really spoke to that. Could The Wall be an allusion to the Cold War? Maybe it's a meditation on nature versus technology. Who knows? You'll need to read it to find out for yourself. The Wall is available in book format only. All right, our final stop is Hawaii. The last book I'm sharing with y'all is Sharks in the Time of Saviors by Kavai Strong Washburn, available in book and ebook formats. The Flores family, parents Augie and Malia and their kids Dean, Nainoa, and Cowie, they're struggling to make ends meet. So Malia and Augie decide it's time to move to Oahu where there are more opportunities. After selling nearly all their things, they have some money left over for a rare family vacation, a glass bottom boat cruise on the Kona coast. This is where our story starts. Somehow, Noah falls overboard and sharks start circling him. Everyone is expecting the worst, of course, but something strange happens. He is brought back to his mother in the jaws of a shark, being treated so gingerly, careful to not spill a drop of blood. Why did the shark save him? What makes Noah so special? News of this strange event spread quickly, making Noah a local legend. He got to the best schools, people gave the family money and gifts. Things were really looking up. Soon, Noah is buckling under the pressure from his parents, and on top of that, his siblings despise him for getting all of the attention. He does not suffer from middle child syndrome, fortunately. The tense sibling rivalry is palpable. The sharks saved Noah's life and changed the family irrevocably, and not all for the better. Sharks in the Time of Saviors is the family saga to end all family sagas. The story is told from multiple perspectives, and each family member has a very distinct voice. Readers get a full understanding of each character and their role in the family, especially the kids. Dean is a rising basketball star, Noah a magical healer, and Cowie a high-achieving academic. With an undercurrent of magic, pillars of Hawaiian culture and folklore, and devastating family drama, Sharks is a stunning debut novel by an author to keep on your radar. That's all I have for you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Nicole. Well, are you ready to bring it home?
I'm bringing it home.
Angela is one of our amazing collection development librarians, which means she gets to buy all of the books that you can check out in the library. You might recognize her voice from guest spots on OPL's The Book Drop podcast, as well as our monthly mini episodes where she gets to gush about all the books she's excited about each month. Angela is drawn to books on cults, pop medical history, and lately, Mexican vampires. Her favorite library memory is of a childhood librarian giving her a book off the sales shelf, but when she didn't have proof of address to get a library card during her. When she's not reading, she's into Zumba, puzzles, podcasting, writing, napping, and improv. Please welcome Angela.
Hello, everybody, book-loving people. I'm so excited to be with you all. If you've ever been in a conversation with me outside of the library, I will drop a book recommendation onto you. So I'm grateful that you all actually came on purpose to get that, because not everyone does. So, speaking of Mexican vampires, I am really into this trend. I gave up on vampires after Anne Rice, but they're back, and I am so excited about it. My first book is Certain Dark Things, as you can see here. So I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Librarians judge book by their covers. Look at this cover. So first thing, I wanted to hang out with her. She's amazing. And after I read the book, I still do, but somebody else has to feed her because vampire. So anyway, we're in Mexico. There are rival vampire clans all over the country, except for Mexico City, because the human gangs have somehow excised them. So nobody is expecting Atl to come there and be there when her family gets completely killed by another vampire group. So she shows up, but she realizes she's lived a life of privilege and she doesn't know how to feed properly. She meets a wonderful, sweet 17-year-old boy, which I have no idea how he showed up so innocent in this dystopia. His job is a trash picker, and she's going to kill him, but she doesn't yet, and he's too sweet. It's really hard to see him in danger. So he wants to help her. He wants to do everything he can to help her deal with all these terrible things that are happening around. She has so many enemies. The rival gangs are coming onto her. The humans are trying to get rid of her because she's a vampire. And then there's this detective who insists on doing her job and figuring out why there's all these dead bodies everywhere. So it's just a mess. And our poor, wonderful friend Atl is trying to figure out what to do next. This is also amazing because she kind of hates Mexico City, but the way she talks about it is so full of detail and wonder. And this was the first city I ever lived in, and I just was there. I was inside of the city while I read this book, and it was just such a good read. It's also super layered because the vampires are descendants of indigenous Mexican people, and so therefore there's a lot of metaphors about colonialism and who actually belongs where and what does this mean. So this book has so many layers. I loved it so much. It filled my heart. And her most recent book, which just came out, is also in Mexico City, but in the 90s. So that was like my dancing time. So this book is available as an audiobook, a downloadable book, a physical book, and it meets the reading challenges of a Latina writer, friendship, and a book mention on the book drum.
By you?
Probably. I don't remember, but most likely, yes. I love this book so much. Okay, so next let's go to some nonfiction, so we can kind of balance it out a little bit. Tastemakers, 7 Immigrant Women Who Revolutionized Food in America by Mayuk Sen is a nonfiction book. I love microhistories of almost any kind. I just want to know little tidbits of information. It's like the podcasts of books. So on International Women's Day, I saw this on some list and I picked it up and didn't put it back down until it was done. It was such a good book that detailed 7 lives of women who came from different countries throughout the world and influenced cuisine in the United States. And there's some Julia Child there as a palate cleanser. So nobody laughed at my joke.
I did very quiet.
Okay. So we have Elena Zelayeta, who came from Mexico and became blind. She started selling Spanish and Mexican dishes out of her house during the Great Depression when her and her husband lost their jobs. Julie Sani started realizing in New York City that people loved Indian food, so she created a cooking school that's still going. She published her first cookbook in 1973. Norma Shirley moved all over the world and introduced the culinary delights of Jamaican food, and she remixed it with French food and other wonderful creative delights. And I just loved seeing all this tapestry of food that we sometimes take for granted that we can experience in the United States from all over the world, and what these women did to make that happen. They often went through a lot of difficult times and hardships because they were outsiders and also because they were women. So seeing how they went through this and what they brought here and how we've been influenced was just so incredible that when I finished the book, I needed a sequel. It doesn't exist yet, but here's to hoping. So the book will satisfy curiosities, create new ones, and make you hungry. It is available as a downloadable audiobook. It's a physical book, and it meets the reading challenge about food. Okay, now back to fiction. So, Trinity Site by Jennifer Giovanni. We open with anthropologist Calliope Santiago, pregnant with twins, crashing her car and becoming unconscious. When she wakes up, she's in another dimension. All of the cars are on the road, but empty. There are no people anywhere. What is she gonna do? She seems fine after the car crash. So she walks home to look for her husband and son, and they're not there. So then she starts wandering around, and the first person she walks into is her neighbor, who's a little girl. And she asks the little girl, "Where are your parents?" She also doesn't know. She then keeps on her journey, and she finds a very complicated teenager and a handsome man who seems to understand more of what's happening than she does, but isn't giving explanations. So as she tries to figure this out, they embark on an adventure where weird things happen everywhere because nothing makes sense. And she's trying to discover what happened and finding out that the future is also a kind of history. There's a juxtaposition of Native history and storytelling versus this character's natural skepticism about everything she is encountering and her insistence on science. Jivan also talks about the complications of race in academia and living in between the languages of your birth and your profession without taking you out of the story. So you have like all of these wonderful, interesting themes, but you also have this amazing, possibly post-apocalyptic story. I don't know. So I loved her writing. I was very connected to parts of the character, other parts of the character. I was like, why are you saying this? But I just needed to know what happened. It was just a wonderful, wonderful read. It is available as a downloadable ebook and as a physical book, and it meets the reading challenge of a book about friendship and by a Latina writer. All right, so we're gonna go back to nonfiction, just so everybody's covered. This is a memoir. I am very much into memoirs. Also, my incredible book club chose this for our next read, so I thought it'd be a great time to talk about it. Some of my book club members are here. Yay! So Solito by Javier Zamora has been coming up for me for a really long time to read. And I took some time to read it because I assumed that it would be very sad and complicated and would get into my feelings. Starting with the cover, right? So first, solito in Spanish means alone, but in the diminutive, like tiny alone. And you have this child, his backpack is almost the size of him. So it's his journey to get to the United States to be reunited with his family. And it is incredible, the voice that comes up in this book. It is, I don't know how the author went back into his 9-year-old body and described it to us as if he was still 9. The curiosity, the not understanding what the adults are doing, the fears, the prayers. It's all throughout this book in a way that is vastly moving, and you have to take breaks. It just is super emotional, but it's an incredible, incredible work of poetry. He describes the smells, the fears, all of the little details that make a story come to life. I don't know how he remembered all this. Javier Zamora is a poet, and this book really shows it. All kinds of memoirs, I think, are incredible, but when poets write them, it just brings another light out. So I enjoyed this, even though it was painful to read in a lot of ways, even though I knew that he would be okay because he wrote a book. Like, he survived this. And it wasn't, there wasn't a lot of big scenes of trauma the way you see in some other books. It was the story. It was very much his story. This book is available as a book, as an ebook, downloadable audiobook, a book club bag, so you too can talk to your book club about it, and is also available in Spanish. And it fits the challenge of friendship, for sure, and a book by a Latina writer. And lastly, to get on a more cheerful note, let's talk about murder. So, we have the Bandit Queens here. We know that our incredible Michelle, that you heard book talking earlier, has great taste in books. So one day she just messaged me and she says, "Have you read this?" And all I did was immediately put it on hold and listen to it. And it was one of my first 5 stars this year. I absolutely love this book so much. So listen to Michelle when she tells you a book is good. So the writing is so engaging, and the characters are they just jump off of the page. I can hear them talking to me. The story is that Geeta lives in a village in India, and people think that she murdered her husband because he disappeared a few years ago. She's okay with this because she doesn't like people, and they kind of leave her alone. She only has to deal with this like lone group of women she's with, so she deals with them sometimes. Also, her very abusive husband is gone, so she's okay. She does have a poster of the Bandit Queen, and the Bandit Queen is an actual person in India, Phulan Devi, who was known as a Robin Hood type figure. She was known for stealing from the rich to give to the poor. She was abused and sold as a child, and then she had her own gang and then became a member of parliament. So very interesting other story is Phulan Devi. She was known to get vengeance on men who abused women. So that might be part of why the poster is in Geeta's house. So back to Geeta's story. So one day, one of her frenemies comes to her and says, "Well, will you help me kill my abusive husband?" And she's like, "Don't want any part of it. Go home, leave me alone." But this woman is kind of sneaky and kind of enwraps her in her plot. Meanwhile, there's a gang, unbeknownst to her, that is after her because they have found out that she's going to help kill this guy. So she's in escalating danger. And then another woman comes up to her because now there's a rumor that she's a husband killer. So it's very, like, it deals with abuse, which is a very hard subject, but it is also such a memorable book. The characters made me laugh so much because they're so witty and strong and powerful, and I really did not know what was going to happen. The twists are super fun, so I really highly recommend that you read The Bandit Queens and find out a little bit more about Fulan Devi. Like, she's really interesting. So this book is available as a book, a downloadable audiobook, and it meets the reading challenge of a book about friendship. Even though it seems like she doesn't have friends at the beginning, she'll find some, don't worry. And a book featuring a real person. Those are my books.
Let's have another round of applause for all of our book talkers. One last one. So we have been doing this event, like I said, for 3 years, and except for our initial event in 2020, we've been doing it online. That event usually takes 8 book talkers, myself, and maybe one other person, but this event took a lot of other staff to pull together. So we could just give one round of applause for all the OPS staff. Okay, so we still have time to visit the bookworm table. Poppy will be open for business if you want to check out books. She's right outside the door. There are little surveys on your table, so if you have a minute, let us know how you like the event. You can just leave those on your table. And lastly, if you did not get a prize and you've been eyeing any of the books on your table, those are all free to take. Literally anything that's on your table except for that centerpiece little sign holder please take it with you if you would like to keep it. All of that stuff is for you guys. Last little bit is our next book bash will be in February, on February 26th. Oh no, 22nd, sorry. I should not have given the books away before I was done, I'm sorry. Our next book bash will be February 22nd. It will be virtual, but as long as you guys all had a good time, we will return to an in-person event next fall. We just like to keep the winter one online because we know snowstorms happen in Nebraska and we don't want to get canceled. So thank you all so much for joining us. Please visit Poppy and the bookworm before you head out. Have a good night. Oh yeah, winners, come back up so we can get your picture, please.